all right. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy, and you are here watching me live. Yes, I am here live before you today. Just to let you guys know, the Jaybefaunt channel is also available on all major podcast platforms, so you can watch me there. I'm on Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. You can catch me on the Revolutionary Black Network. You can find me on the JB Show on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as the Roundtable on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please make sure to give this stream a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. I promise you cookies. I may promise you brownies. I may promise you, I don't know, pie. Who knows, Also, a shout out to my patrons on Patreon and Coffee. I appreciate everything that you guys have done and helping keep the lights on. And I am deeply humble and grateful for all of you. And also, if you would like to also follow me on Rumble, I'm also on there as well. I'd like to give a warm and gracious welcome to Lady F. Fiorella Isabel from the MCSC Network and Convo Couch. It is so good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. It's nice going on other people's shows because I don't have to think as much. Like, yeah.
Yeah, my brain never shuts off, so I
Yeah.
can identify with that. It just yeah. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's watching in the chat. It's so good to see all of you here. And yes, I'm doing triple duty today. I had Jimmy Dore on earlier today. Then I did the round table, and now I'm here with you. So
Wow.
yeah, I've been streaming since 4 o'clock, so it's been a long day.
It's tiring.
Yeah, it just so happens that everything just converged at the same time. So yeah,
good for you.
Yeah, your mic is actually a little bit crackling, just a little bit. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Weird. Is it crackling now or?
As you're speaking, yeah.
That's weird because I use this mic every day.
Yeah, I don't know. How does it sound on my end, everybody? Is the sound clear? Just everybody in the chat, just let me know because I want to make sure that everything is good. Yeah, Lucky Burrito says there's some crackling going on. Yeah. You sound speak again, please.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, the crackling stopped. It's good.
Okay.
It's clear.
All right,
Thank you. All right, so it worked.
Good.
So I wanted to have a few standard questions that I typically ask, my guests when they come on. And this is more about your journey to where you've gotten. One of the reasons why I asked this is because I want more people to feel empowered to come into the space to also speak because, as free speech people, we're all about people being able to come in and give their opinion about what's going on so that they can also push the narrative. Now, the narrative that we're pushing is one of a narrative that uplifts the material needs of all of us, right? So you're a political commentator, journalist, activist. Can you give us a brief summary and how you got into that and what inspired you to get into this independent media space?
Right. So actually I went to school for journalism and public relations. Essentially I had two majors, one in English and one in communications in general, focused on PR. And when I was doing that, I saw just how easily people were manipulated into narrative management, which is what everything is besides printing what somebody else doesn't want you to print. Yeah. So knowing that actually really led me to this path inconsequently, because I started writing non-political things. I was writing like for magazines that had nothing to do with politics,
Mhm.
very like lifestyle type of magazines, and I was doing that while I was in the acting industry in LA.
Mm.
And it was just a very vapid world where you had to focus on so many things that were not just inherently who I was as a person, especially when
Mhm.
you saw so much poverty next to so much luxury.
Yeah.
And I started getting involved with the activist movement in LA and people just doing things for the homeless. And I got involved in an organization called She Does, which did a lot of work with unhoused women who were victims of domestic violence. And I got involved with the Bernie Sanders movement in 2015, 2016, the first
Okay.
time he ran. And I started just going into the political aspect of what he said, which to me at that time was pretty much how I felt, that there was just so much wealth inequality and nobody was doing anything about it, and that politicians, both in the Democratic and Republican Party, were entirely um, just inefficient and didn't have any sort of actual goal to do anything for the people. And so I sort of went through it that way, and I met Pasta Craig
Mhm.
at a restaurant, and he and I became friends because we were Bernie Sanders supporters and in the industries too, and we just didn't, a lot of people just don't talk about politics in those industries, whether it's the hospitality industry or the entertainment industry or any industry that involves any sort of networking with a bunch of people that are important, because politics was told to you that it would just cause a rift in your relationships. And so we decided that we were going to start a show because we both sort of got involved and thought that there was something that could possibly be done, attention being drawn to what was happening in the city around us, which was LA. And there was so much going on at that time and
Mhm.
so much fight in that an attempt to like really draw attention to the wealth inequality. And that was like a few years ago when things were still not as bad as they are now. And so we went about it by interviewing activists and political candidates in
Mhm.
2017 is when we started, late 2017. We
Okay.
officially started the YouTube channel in 2018, but we went on Facebook and had a studio that we
Mhm.
would go to in 2017. And we really wanted to focus on having good production quality, having an engineer, having being able to do it in a news show type of way, not like just a podcast type of way, but like a news show type of way. And yeah, that's it, went on from there.
Very nice. There's a common thread that a lot of people had their start when there was like an awakening, particularly
Mhm,
for a lot of us that were around in 2015, 2016. Now, I admittedly was not in the political sphere around that time.
mhm,
I was, uh, basically raised deeply religious, and I was doing more religious work during that time. So I didn't start getting into the political space until about 2018,
mhm.
and we were having the gubernatorial race between DeSantis and oh my god, I forgot the gentleman.
Yeah.
Um, my brain is shut off.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
know who you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, Andrew Gillum.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started hearing about things like different policies like Medicare for all and the Forever Wars and things like that. And Andrew Gillum was basically saying that he was for that until
Right.
the general election, where he walked away from Medicare for all and then started going with Hillary Clinton. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I dipped my toe then, and then in 2020, when I started to see more of Bernie Sanders, it started to shift me, and that's how where I started to take notice of the things that were going on. And then as I started to get notice of things that were going on, I started moving further and further to the left. And I started seeing not just as far, as being on the left, but also versus, authoritarianism versus anti-authoritarianism.
Mhm.
And so when I saw that, I was just like, wait a minute. Yeah, like when people say that the government is corrupt, it's like, yeah. It's like, wait, I knew it was corrupt, but I didn't
Right,
realize it was this corrupt. Like, holy crap. And
right.
so that's kind of how I got my start too. So
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I've voted for Obama before, and I was, always politically had political discussions with my family because my
mhm,
family are immigrants. So they always had politics on the table. And before I was involved in politics, I was always like not like super spiritual, but like kind of talking about, so many things that people don't like know that I've talked about, like I don't know, like just metaphysical things. I was always talking about how we human beings needed to have an awakening, and that something was coming in the timeline. Like, there was that whole people thought that the world was going to end in 2012, because the Mayan calendar had a whole like thing where they didn't do anything past 2012, so they misunderstood that. But during that time, of course, it was post the 2008 crash. There was, a lot of suffering, but then there was an awakening, and I think people started figuring things out through the lens of everything that was happening worldwide. And I think that is what launched into the political awakening that you just mentioned. And also, of course, the emergence of police brutality during that time, not the emergence, but the attention put on it, by the media finally. And the increase in phones and being able to capture everything that was going on, all of that came together. And so that's why I think you saw a movement that started paying attention to really the cracks that had been in the United States for a long time, but started really deepening during that time. And now we're, I think, at the pivotal moment where the house is about to fall. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that to scare people or to be sensationalist. I say it because looking at the geopolitical world right now that we're in, and looking at the foreign policy that we're engaged in, the relations. We just, Senate just approved $40 billion for Ukraine, 215 million for food, and the American people are really just going to suffer a lot because of this, because of what their government is doing. And the American people, of course, are not all bad people. In fact, the vast majority of people just want basic things. And the government, though, is something a lot of people don't pay attention to. Foreign policy is what people don't pay attention to, and they should start. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I said, I'm sorry, your mic is crackling a lot again.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'll just use the other mic. I don't know why it's having
Yeah,
issues with
yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I'll just use the Okay, can you hear me regardless?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is the disdain within this country. I mean, we saw it during the Occupy movement, uh,
Mhm.
back then, and so you know, it's gotten to the point where there's a fatigue among everyone in this nation, and that fatigue that we're feeling is because there has been this catering towards the ultra wealthy as well as the politicians,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like being a child, and you go to lunch, and as you're going to lunch and you're going down the lunch line, you're constantly fed, the mystery meat, the slop, the stuff that doesn't look very good. But then you always see that those small group of particular kids They're getting the pizzas, they're getting the honey buns, they're getting the 7 Up, the cherry 7 Up. They're getting all this good stuff every single day. And you're like, but we want it too. And then people keep telling, oh, just wait. We'll finally get it to you. You'll get it to you soon. We'll get it to you. Just wait a little bit longer. Just vote about it. And then we do the same thing over and over again. Please give us the better food. And then they even start giving you even less portions.
Yeah.
And you're like, but they're getting huge mounds of food, great food, and we're just getting this slop, and we're getting even less of that. Oh, but just hang on longer, just vote more. And as we keep doing this, we're realizing they're never going to give us what we actually need.
Right.
We're never going to do it. And so this is one of the reasons why there's so many of us that are disaffected from both parties. There's so many reasons why there's so many of us who are now looking at it and saying we're going to a different direction. Actually, Jimmy Dore and I were talking about this earlier about this speech of political nihilism. And it's like, well, really, what is nihilistic? Is it continue to keep going in the same direction over and over? Or is it changing the direction and trying to see if there's a better way? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's nihilistic. I think it's realistic. Essentially, I mean, to look at the world as it is, I think it's unrealistic to pretend it's not happening, right? I think that people who are understanding that electoral politics is not going to get us out of this. You can't vote your way out of this situation. They don't fear you. They don't fear us. They know that there's a segment of the population that's going to pick team A or team B, no matter what. And this is why they continue to use wedge issues to divide us. Like they could have already, for example, Democrats could have a long time ago codified Roe v. Wade and it wouldn't have been a problem, but they refuse to do that because they know they can go back to it at any given time and point out to the Republicans and fearmonger people into saying, well, this is going to become the handmaid's tale if you don't vote for us. So even though we haven't given you crap, you got to vote for us. And so we have to look at things from a different dimension because for too long we've been looking at it in this two-dimensional way, left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, team A versus team B, blue versus red. And so that is it's not helping us. It's not really doing anything for us because we don't live in a fair system. We don't live in a system where we have fair elections. I've gone all over the Latin America, the global south, and looked at elections. Their elections are far more efficient. Somehow they're able to get every single person in their country, the vast majority of people, to have an ID and to get an ID. But it's like a whole process and a whole problem in America to give someone an ID. And like, this is why we have this conflict. Well, we don't want, we don't want people to have to bring an ID here. But at the same time, it's like our election system is it's just there's no security and there's also so many vulnerabilities. We have the worst people in power of our elections. We have the most corrupt people in power of our elections because we don't have power over anything. Congress can just literally pass legislation to go after, to go directly to Ukraine now because they don't have to consult with us. They don't even have to consult with each other. That was part of Rand Paul's objection to that. And that the thing is, for me, it's like I'm looking at the political sphere right now in the United States, and it doesn't make sense that only 11 Republicans voted no on this package. 11 Republicans. I mean, where is the squad? Where are the progressives? Are more anti-war than Republicans in Congress and in the Senate? Where's Bernie Sanders? Where's Elizabeth Warren, supposedly the most leftist progressive senators? And so we're at this point where it doesn't really matter to me the label as long as the actions are there. And I think a lot of people are still in that mentality, which is why they attack us, because they're in that mentality of, no, if somebody has a D by their name, they're better no matter what. And it's just not the way the world works. The world is very gray. The world has a lot of nuance, and you just can't be like that, especially in the moment we're in, where we need to go outside of electoral politics. We need to have an actual anti-establishment, anti-fascist movement, because right now, for all the talk of white supremacy that Joe Biden and the Democrats are doing now, they have done absolutely nothing to take care of people economically, and they've done everything to help fund neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and not just neo-Nazis but other radical groups like the White Helmets in Syria and others in the West Asia that they've created and funded for their to use them for their own means. So what to me is the most racist thing you can do is go around the world toppling governments and cooing people and bombing black and brown people all over the world. And that to me is something that a lot of progressives and people on the left don't pay attention to when they talk about white supremacy. The reason we have such a police system and such a prison system in the United States is because we emulate it exactly from the military industrial complex, the same ones that train our police. That's how it is, and that's all part of it.
Yeah. And while we're talking about what is going on, I mean, let's look at what is happening under a Democratic administration. We want to talk about our people talking about Democrats, they're for our rights. No, they're not. This is an article actually out of the Jacobin. It talks about ICE is tracking your every move. This is by Branko Mercetic. And this is actually pretty startling. Not startling. It's scary. I should say that. It begins with immigration and customs enforcement has been known for both mass deportations and unmarked van snatchings of peaceful protesters. ICE also turned out to be operating a vast intelligence system that tracks, the movement of hundreds of millions of Americans. And it talks about how this is a conclusion of a report from the Georgetown Law Center on Privacy and Technology, which argues through contracts and partnerships with private data brokers, utility companies, and DMVs, and other governmental bureaucracies, ICE has quietly built a system that lets it peer into and track the personal lives of all Americans on a never before seen scale. And it talks about how, let's see here, actually, let me enlarge this just a little bit more so that people can read it. Hang on. It says, according to the report, ICE has used facial recognition technology to scan the driver's license photos of roughly a third of U.S. adults and can access the driver's license data of 3/4 of adults and can track movements of cars in cities that make up 70% of the adult population. And at least 5 of the 17 jurisdictions where undocumented people can apply for licenses, ICE can search the state driver's record without a warrant. So this is happening under a Democratic president. If you think that this would happen under a Republican president only, you're sadly mistaken. I have a big, beautiful, diamond encrusted bridge to sell you over top of a volcano. If you think that it's not going to happen under them. And this is one of the reasons why we've been talking about both parties. Yes, both parties are complicit in taking your rights away and not, pushing for your material needs. They push for the material needs of the military industrial complex. They push for the material needs of the prison industrial complex or big pharma or big agriculture, or hell, they push for the material needs of the nonprofit industrial complex. They push for all these different things. And so we have to be vigilant. And sometimes it means us getting out in the streets. Like, for instance, I know you've been to your share of anti-war rallies and things like that. So I mean, we have to use our power as a people to go up against this. Your thoughts on the article, by the way?
Oh, yeah. So the article, I mean, it's nothing new. Unfortunately, this has been happening for a while. So the Obama administration essentially built the stages and the cages for the current, the last administration, the Trump administration, to push that whole thing through. And now comes in the Biden administration using a lot of the same people from the Obama administration to continue that immigration policy. And they're doing it by playing it out like it's not we're not sending as many people out there to catch immigrants. We're just going to use surveillance and technology. But a lot of
Mhm.
the times that technology is far more dangerous. When you're talking about cryptic fascism, uh, you have to focus on the technology aspect of it. The surveillance state is growing, and our rights are diminishing. Our civil rights, our civil liberties, they're diminishing through the expansion of the surveillance state. And pretty soon it's not going to be just, that they can scan your license. They can scan everything. They can find they're scanning people's license plates, they're scanning people's faces, they're scanning everything. And eventually we're going to live in a society that the United States, constantly talks about China being authoritarian, Russia being authoritarian. The only difference here is that you live in an illusion that allows you to think that we're never going to get there, or that we're not there in other aspects. But now, with all the censorship and everything that a lot of independent media has been experiencing, from every single conflict, from the elections to the pandemic to now, of course, we have this Russia-Ukraine situation where nobody can have a different opinion on what's going on, or they're completely and totally Russian assets. That's going to increase the surveillance state. And we saw what happened when they tried to do the Ministry of Truth, but it was called the Disinformation Governance Board, and the Department of Homeland Security tried to do that. But the problem is they put somebody at the helm, Nina Jankowicz, who is the most unlikable. Nobody likes her. She's creepy. I think Pasta calls her Scary Poppins because she did Mary Poppins' video. And so when you put somebody like that, it's very off-putting, and she was biased and everybody could see it. So they're like, okay, we're going to pause this for a second, but don't think they're going to stop. This is only the beginning. And I think it's great that you pay attention to that. And like I say this all the time, the American government constantly calls brutal dictators to Russia, calls Putin a brutal dictator, says Cuba is under dictatorship, Venezuela, Nicaragua. But really, do we have different presidents? I mean, we do in face, but does the policy actually change depending on who is president? Not really. We're still under the same type of foreign policy. They still haven't done anything for working people, and we're back at square one. So really, what I dare say, one of the longest dictatorships to me, and especially in the last 100 years or so, has been the US government, because no matter who's president, there is only one way of doing things, and those who don't abide by it get
Mhm.
shot or killed or completely put outside of the political spectrum.
Well, I mean, would you say it's appropriate to say that the presidents of the United States, they are just employees of the central banks?
I would say the central banks and the covert agencies that we have, like the NSA, the CIA, and the military apparatus. It's like this intelligence uh,
Mhm.
apparatus complex. And you mentioned the banks, and now you have to add in, of course, the Silicon Valley, the surveillance state, the technological companies that are
Yep.
basically controlling what goes on. I mean, it's when government merges with corporations. This is essentially fascism. I mean, as defined by the fascist himself, Mussolini. So, I mean, this is where we're at right now, right?
Absolutely. And the thing is that I a lot of people, they sit and hand wring about Trump being a fascist, right? They're like, "Oh my God, Trump is a fascist," and it's like, you know what? I agree, but why are you voting for the same guy that is basically doing all the same things that Trump did?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna call Trump a fascist, Joe Biden then must be one too.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
the
mean,
guy is the architect of the system that Trump exploited, right? Because
yeah,
Biden's been in politics for a long time. He wrote
yeah.
the 1994 crime bill. He wrote the Patriot Act. He worked with segregationists. Like, I mean, of course, he has various accusations of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And the whole thing was, oh, Trump is a sexist, blah blah blah. But it's like, well, why is Biden okay? And Biden comes from that legacy, from that old school legacy. And so that's one of the reasons why so many people did vote for Donald Trump, because they saw him as an outsider, and he really isn't. I mean, he's still a billionaire, and he's been in, he wasn't a politician, but he's been in these circles. People need to stop looking to billionaires to save them. And I think that's a problem right now that we're seeing with Elon Musk, and how people are putting all their hopes and dreams on this, Elon Musk figure. And that's part of the propaganda, right?
Yeah.
We're like conditioned to think that Batman's going to come save the day, that Superman, that
Yeah.
Spider-Man. And that it is part of it. And it's like, guys, like, the only people that are going to save us are us. We have to save us. No billionaire is going to come in and save us. There's no benevolent billionaire, because to become a billionaire, you have to exploit so many people. And none of these people came from working their way up to become billionaires. They all come from rich families. You can look them all up, from Bill Gates to Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos. All of them, they were born into wealth. That's how it works.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a quote, Dr. Seuss: one fash, two fash, red fash, blue fash. That's the way it goes. I mean, that's what we've been looking at. And you literally have to exploit people to get that much wealth. What makes anybody think that they are actually benevolent or good at all? Like,
It's
get your
hope.
head out of the sand.
Yeah. It's just hope. They want to believe in something. I mean, if you look at Hollywood, and that's another reason why it's just something that I can't, like, Hollywood as it is, it's just more propaganda. You look at every movie differently once you know what's going on, and it's like, damn, like, you can't even, it's hard to allow yourself to be entertained. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying, sometimes, okay, like, entertain yourself, but at the same time, know that in many instances, if not everywhere, this is the most propagandized country in the world, where
Mhm.
the reason we are so unaware about the rest of the world, while the rest of the world knows our politics way more than we know the politics of Russia, Ukraine, the EU, the UK, like Latin America, it's because we are made to not really care. And I think that that self-centered nature is not, like, some people can't afford it. Some people are working so much all the time, they don't have time to really watch the news or pay attention to what's going on. It is made to be that way. It's made to keep you in this system where you're constantly working, where you're smart enough to do the work, but dumb enough to not realize who's behind the scenes. And that's what George Carlin talked about in a lot of his comedy back in the day, right? They don't want you to be too smart to know that you're being used. And so that is essentially the United States. And I think that for the longest time, we were able to, like, go kind of like bypass it, because we have been not feeling the repercussions of the government's actions as much as other countries have been, with the sanctions and the political turmoil that comes from regime change. But now, with what we're seeing with this conflict, where we have a 41-year record high inflation, you see the price of gas. The price of gas in Florida right now is what gas was in LA like less than a year ago. Like, it's insane. And the price of food, the food shortages, just everything coming together, it's not going to be a normal cyclical cycle. I think a lot of economists are saying that, oh, this happens all the time. Yeah, like, it's a 10-year cycle thing, but we have other factors that are contributing to this too. And I think um if you know what's going on in Europe, is that a lot of people already cannot pay gas prices, their energy bills, and they're already using fireworks to make fire inside their homes. And that's, I mean, this is where it's going to exacerbate, that situation is going to exacerbate, become worse as we go into winter, where it's actually freezing and people depend on the gas that they're no longer getting from Russia. And of course, Russia is also an exporter of so many other things like wheat. And we are an import country. We import everything from the outside. We are not prepared to be self-sufficient. So a lot of that isn't on the minds of people, but once it starts, it will be. And maybe, I don't know, I don't wish poverty upon anybody, but at the same time, I think so many people are too comfortable in the fact that they can continue to ignore the house that's on fire. It's like the meme with the little dogs, like everything's fine and everything's burning around. That's where we're at, guys. We're that meme.
Yeah. And then some of us are screaming that the house is burning. And you
Yeah.
have some people who are supposed to put out the fire, and they're taking a little squirt gun and they're going pew, 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 trying to put out the fire. And we're like, what are you doing?
Hmm.
Grab the fire hose and dump the motherfucker. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And a lot of us that are screaming at the top of our lungs are those of us that are disenfranchised the most.
Hmm.
You as a woman, and you as a Latina, me as a disabled gay black man, we're screaming at the top of our lungs, and we're like, yo, we're suffering out here. And yet they're like, oh, all you got to do is just vote for every 2 to 4 years, and then you guys will finally get what you want. You'll get it. Don't worry. And we're like, they're nuts. They're out of their goddamn mind. We're screwed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. For the longest time, I tried to believe that the revolution would happen here in the United States, and I've come to conclude that it's just not going to happen here anytime soon. Because people are not there. When you go to protests, for example, we were just at a protest talking about Julian Assange and the damn wars. There's a few people that show up, right? But it's not enough. And then you have the things the American people protest for are largely symbolic, right? Let's say you have the Women's March. I'm not saying, yeah, that none of those issues are important, but you have to tie these things to economics or you're not helping anybody. The
Yeah.
thing that helps the most, that helps women and marginalized communities the most is literally economics, like helping people raise their standard of living, raise their education. Right now, the education system is just a big for-profit system that has a lot of us, millennials and Gen Z, completely dependent on it through student loans. And then you have what the things are being taught. There is a lot of propaganda, frankly, and it's really sad that the state of our education is so bad, because when you go to other countries and you see the things they learn and the way they learn things, it's completely different. And I've had the opportunity to do that, and I was just mesmerized and flabbergasted too as to how different the education is in other countries, and even in Europe alone, like the education there is completely different. And this is why it sucks, but like we're not being given first world type of um basic things like that at all. And of course you have this country where people can't even protest because they'll lose their health care.
Yeah. Yeah. People can't protest in Florida because one of the states decided to make it illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
DeSantis is one of the most oh my god, like he is one of the most like team sports playing Republicans. Like he'll talk about censorship when it's his team, and he'll say, "Oh, I'm being censored." And then he'll turn around and try to make it a crime to protest, try to arrest protesters, because he knows that the majority of the people that are protesting or that were protesting at that time were supporting an ideology like or BLM or were on the left, things that he doesn't support. And it's people like that to me that are some of the worst, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. They only allow for their ideology to be the guiding factor. And if they don't support like the ideology of the other person, then the rules don't apply. You can't have that. You can't either you say we support free speech, period, for everybody, even if I don't agree with you, or you don't. And I think that people like DeSantis contribute to the entire sort of culture war, team sports mentality. People, I mean, he just put out this bill that's like an anti-communist bill that talk like kids must be taught in Florida to learn how the destruction of communism plagued so many nations in the world. I'm like, okay, can we learn about the destruction of capitalism? Can we learn about that too? I mean, we're living it, right? I mean, it's just so ridiculous, and it's all for brownie points from this sector. And that's all politicians are. I mean, that's all they're there for. They're there to pretty much narrative manage. They're there to pretty much be influencers. We've seen what the squad has turned into, right?
Yeah.
Basically Instagram influencers and just like tweeting, oh, we all need health, Medicare for all. Okay, tweet about it some more. It's good. I'm not in Congress, dude. I'm not in Congress. She is in Congress. AOC's in Congress. All the entire squad's in Congress. They keep voting for expanding NATO, for more war, for more sanctions on the foreign policy side, on the domestic policy side. They talk about Medicare for all, but they don't do anything about it. And so what is it? What we're not there. We're not there anymore. We're past it. And this is why my coverage has shifted into more foreign policy and anti-imperialism and the surveillance state, because I don't like, that's not where we're at. And I think also locally, if people are trying to do things locally via city council, via their local community, I think that also is a way to sort of prepare for the downfall, because it is happening right now, and it's coming to get worse.
Yeah. What would you give until, well, I mean, the United States has been in a collapse for decades, but the final like death knell of the empire, like what time frame do you give it in your, expert opinion?
I mean, it's not gonna happen overnight. I mean, I think we're gonna enter into a recession by 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just looking at the economics of everything that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it takes like decades. Rome didn't, like, it fell, but it didn't just fall overnight. I mean, there's gonna be denial. We're gonna go through the stages of grief as it starts happening. We already are. There's an era, there's not an air of just decay and like nihilism
Mm-hmm.
from so many people. But for me, it's like there has to be acceptance. And I think there's a lot of denial right now. Like, it's going to be okay. We're just going to, everything's going to bounce back and the United States is going to be fine. The dollar is already diminishing in value. For example, we're just printing money that doesn't have any value. And so
Yeah.
that's causing inflation. And so now we have a lot of people, more and more people are moving out of the country. And you have two generations in debt. You have the millennial generation in debt from student loan debt, and then you have Gen Z that is increasingly in debt because of that. And then you have a lot of mental illness. You have a lot of fractured, divided populations at each other's throats.
Yeah.
You have a war machine that usually war can sometimes, during World War II, it did help the economy because they brought the production to home, right? They were producing guns and they were producing arms and giving people jobs, and through the war. That's not happening anymore. So it's the opposite. The wealth is going outside. So it's going to take, like, I think, a few decades for it to really, really look like it's falling. But the good news is we're shifting into from a unipolar world to a multipolar world.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with a lot of different things. There's a lot of people vying for control of the world right now. It's becoming less about nation states than rather more about these billionaires. And that's not like some conspiratorial thing. It's like people with a lot of money have a lot of things in common. And these things, they sit around, they go to the same parties, they attend the same type of events, they network, they live in the same communities. So yes, they all have a common objective goal. And the common goal is that they can't afford to have all these people around here, right? To have all of us here. So there's going to be a lot of shortages, a lot of like food crises. There's definitely going to be economic downfall in terms of like the standard of living in the United States, which has already been falling. If you go to other countries, you can live like the lifespan is higher than ours. You have the increasing food allergies, the increasing just diseases that a lot of us are getting just from the things, the environment, the chemicals, the food. There's a lot of things in the United States that are legal chemical wise that are illegal in other countries and other unions like the European Union and the UK. You'd be surprised like how there are products there that they don't allow. So I think it's going to take a few decades, but it's definitely right now in decline. And but like I said, the good news is there is going to be more cooperation from other countries, and I think that the revolution, like the actual revolution to push back, is going to happen in the global South and the East as well. And that's where there's a lot of attention being paid to now is the East, because the West is just, and not just us, but Europe too, in decline.
Yeah, basically the Western nations,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. In fact, I was just looking at the 5 stages of grief. You know, if you look at it
Yeah.
from a economic and global scale, you know, we're in the denial stage, but next is anger.
Mm-hmm.
After anger, you know, then it's bargaining, then depression, then acceptance. Um, and it's gonna be a wild ride. Um, and some, you know, people like me myself, I don't know if I'm gonna live to see it all because of being chronically ill, and also being in this space and using my voice to say these things in this country. The powers that be do not look kindly upon those of us who speak truth to power.
Right.
Just ask people like Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King Jr. So, you know, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to get the word out as much as we possibly can, as early as we can, so that we can do this. With that being said, one of my next questions for you, um, you kind of answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask is what is some advice that you would give people, especially to women who want to venture into this space?
Oh boy. Buckle up. It's not any sort of um it's not easy. You have to have a lot of mental awareness, mental clarity and peace. Don't take what people say about you as something to detract you from doing. Just make it something that will push you harder to do it. Do it if you are ready to face everything in the book, especially you specified women. There are more men in this industry than there are women. And women, of course, were subjected to completely different standards. And I never get to talk about this because nobody ever asked me about this. But you know, we're if we wear makeup, it's discussed. If we don't wear makeup, it's discussed. If you wear a different color lipstick, it's discussed. If you whatever you wear, it's discussed. However you say things, whatever you sound like, you may say the same thing as some other journalist or commentator said, but they believe them and not you. I mean, these are things that I think when women listen to this, they know. Um, and just know you're going to be in a field where it's a male dominated field, and you are going to be assessed a lot more like more harshly than your male counterparts, and that's just the reality of the world we live in. And I think, you know, you just have to be tough, and you just cannot let a lot of the hate that will, you know, if you're doing anything right, you're going to get hate at some point by somebody. And don't let that affect you as much, because if you know you're doing the right work, you should just continue doing the right work, and just don't let that stop you. And find your allies in this field,
Yeah.
because it's important to have people that are allies. It's important to have people to get to know who people are on a human level, not just a professional or career level. and be able to really make those connections, especially perhaps with obviously with members of the same sex, like women too, but also men who like are, who can be friends and who are reliable, and make your own sort of network of people that you can rely on and that have your back. And yeah, it's important to also get away from this every now and then. If you're looking at the news every single day like I am all the time, and the brain doesn't shut off,
Yeah.
you're going to drive yourself insane. You do have to allow yourself to have some time off, because it's hard for some of us. For me, like, I'm constantly aware of everything. I have to be aware of everything that's going on. And like, there are times when it's been weird, but like I forgot my phone or something happened where I didn't have my phone. And those were the times where I was able to just breathe. And it's important to have a time off, as anxious as it makes me sometimes to be away from knowing what the hell is going on in the world. You need to allow yourself to do that and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, all those great points from you. I This is one of the reasons why I try to be more heavy-handed in having um, women in this space on my channel. If we're going to be allies, then be allies, right? We
Yes.
can't just say that we're for, the equity and equality if we don't, provide that as example. This is kind of funny, but Optimism of the Will said, "Never seen JB's cleavage discussed." Let me tell you, JB got a cleavage.
Yeah, A cups or
Just
B
believe
cups.
it. But I never heard about it. So it's there though, honey. That's- but yeah, I mean, it's just there's this there's this double standard that should not exist, but it does. And the fact is that um like your perspective is different than mine, but it's no less valuable. And so I think I want to have more women, like you. I've had you, the Bank Sisters, Sappy Sabs. I had Josana. I've had Misty, Glory Jones. I've had you all on, particularly because we need more of you. Because if you're 50% of the population, you should be 50% of this space. Am I?
Right.
I mean, does that sound crazy to me? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it is what I mean, I if I were to like constantly be upset about it, I would just I would be upset all the time, I do, it does get frustrating a lot, but like you
yeah,
kind of, unfortunately, we kind of learn to live with it. And like, but I think it's
yeah,
a discussion I think on the left, a lot of people just sort of like, especially men, they're like, are we talking, it's like, well, the shit lives. Yeah, the shit lives, and the neoliberals co-opt the whole, woman thing. They co-opted the feminism. They co-opted everything. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems. And that's what people need to know. Like, it doesn't mean that there aren't problems. And just because I'm not talking about it 24/7,
hmm
or you don't hear me complain about it 24/7, doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it's like, I work through it. And I think, the left needs to do a better job of like admitting, okay, well, maybe we should have more women. We should pay attention to what women are saying, we should, and not just the left, but everybody. Because it's become this sort of like, oh, the left is, no, it's everybody. I mean, right? Like, there's different perspectives depending on what the hell life you've led, where you've come from.
true.
So it's just another added factor that adds a difference into your perspective. And
hmm
that's it. And it shouldn't be something looked on as, well, here we go, they're going to talk about this bullshit. That's not how it should be. It's not, it shouldn't be looked down upon to discuss it or as a negative, because it's a really real thing. And the same thing happens, of course, when you see, you guys at Revolutionary Blackout are very a few people. I mean, Nico was like the only black content creator a few years ago, essentially, with what's his name? I don't watch him anymore, but Tim Black. And that was it. And so that, I mean, I'm glad that there are more voices from these populations that are going to add a whole different, like a different perspective, because we need that, right? I'm like, it gets tiring seeing the same generic type of person uh going. I mean, I'm just going to be very kind now, but it gets tiring seeing the same generic type of person like constantly saying the same thing. And like, it's like, oh my god, they said this, oh my god, it's amazing. Like, it gets tiring. And so I think a lot of people who aren't who don't have this perspective and who didn't grow up with that perspective get really like turned off or like defensive, like, oh, are this is like, it's like, no, it's not about you. It's just just be mindful that this is another perspective that you're maybe missing in your discussions. And so I think, it's important. This is why I go to the global south. This is why I want to go to other countries. This is why I'm moving across the pond, like across the world, because I want to get to know other perspectives. Because as much as I can sit in a studio and talk about it, if we're not on the ground covering something, I'm really limited in my scope. And that's how it's always been. And I think that expansion, if you can do it, I always tell people, travel, especially if you're young and you're still in school, travel, because that really made an impact in my life as to what it was that I wanted. And it's like, I like people, I like getting to know people, I like people on a general scale. But I also, because of that, I'm like I'm very selective about the people I let into my life. And so that because of that, right? But I like to listen to people's different perspectives and where they're coming from. And I think that's why it allows me to do this work, because you can find connections between humans. And at the end of the day, honestly, as cliche as it may sound, we do all have a lot more in common with each other,
Yeah.
no matter what part of the world that we're in, than
Yeah.
a lot of these billionaires and these politicians that run the world.
Yeah. I have a confession to make. Um, and that confession is I have never been outside of this country. Never. And I would like to, but I can't afford it.
Right.
And why can I afford it? Because the way the system is basically rigged just for a certain subset of people.
Yeah.
And one of the one of the primary focuses of my channel is to bring in a perspective that many people haven't heard before. Like, for instance, I'm currently still within a hair's breadth of the poverty line, right?
Mhm.
How many people who are in this space are struggling financially like I am?
Not many. That's one of my main criticisms, Jay. Like, a lot of the people that, tout themselves as being these, huge, journalists or huge commentators or YouTubers, whatever, the most prolific ones don't come from that space.
Yeah,
And they get the most accolades, and you're just hearing the same perspectives, just different faces. So to me, I don't like that, because it's like, wait a minute, why aren't we hearing from the working class? The people that literally live through poverty have a completely different perspective than somebody who doesn't. And that's just a fact. And it's not because I'm trying to say, oh, like, oh, you want to focus on only on the identity and this. No, it's literally a fact that if you live in a different economic space, your perspective is going to be radically different than somebody who didn't, and who never did, no matter what your I mean, obviously race matters to a degree, but like, there are a lot of people with money like Barack Obama who live in a different space than you do. And that's a completely like valid point. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you have some things in common, but really, let's talk. You have more in common with a poor working class white person that has never been able to leave the country, and that is also suffering from a disease, and you do with Barack Obama because of money situation, because of the economics of it. And I think, a lot of the times we don't pay enough attention to that, to the economic aspect too, of like where these creators are coming from, and also what lives that they lead. Where did are they immigrants? Are their families like this? And that's not why I watch people either. But it's great having that perspective. It's great having those perspectives and putting your money where your mouth is. Because if all I'm going to watch is a bunch of very wealthy, Ivy League educated people who just sit there and think they're so intellectually superior to everybody because they read every book by Marx and they know theory, and they don't apply this theory because they're not living in this reality. What the hell am I doing? Like what oh great, I get to feel so much more superior and intellectually just I get to like feel so good about myself. But really, you're not living in this reality, and you're not opening yourself up to the people who have a lot to say about the current state of the world, because they can't escape it. They can't escape the reality.
Yeah. I also have another perspective, that number one, I never went to an Ivy League college. In fact, I never went to college. I'm not
Wow.
college educated. And so how many of us in this country are not college educated that, exist and work within this country and are going through these motions of paycheck to paycheck, living in poverty. There may be one of those times where we may get an influx because of a economic stimulus or something like that. But then it's like a vicious cycle. And one of the things I wanted to point out is because of the way many of us, especially those of us who are near poverty, and I can say this because like literally like 95% of my disability check goes to the government. So if anybody wants to say, "Oh, JB got money," no, miss me with that bullshit. And so I have a sense of urgency that it feels like I'm in a burning house all the time.
Right.
And so I don't feel that this is not holistic by trying to go into a different direction with an intent of plan in order to use the power of our voices and our feet, proverbially in the streets. And I'm not saying this as an ableist, because some people aren't able to actually get out in the streets, but they're able to do something in order to help affect change in the way that they can do it, each according to their ability.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how many people have my perspective? I mean, yeah, there's some of us that also may be queer in this space. That's fine. How many people are in an economic position? And so that's one of the, also facets, because I actually made a tweet about it. I said there is a economic, gulf, within the left media space,
Oh yeah.
between, some of us. It's
Oh
just,
yeah, there is. And you know what? When I was doing work abroad in Nicaragua, I
uh
found some of my journalist friends that were the best at their work and were extremely open and extremely anti-imperialist. And they were talking about how there is no real left in the United States. I mean, it's just they're like, that's not left, that's what. And we got to talking, and I realized a lot of them have worked in either hospitality or retail or like wage earning jobs, and like they know what it's like, and what it's like to deal to deal with people, yeah, but to also be so dependent on the generosity of people. Because in America, let's say you work as a server or bartender, I've done both,
mhm.
and you're like dependent on how much you get tipped and stuff, and like just having, and you have to budget out how much money you make, and it's this thing where it's you see mothers that like I'm a single woman, I don't have a child, but I remember just seeing mothers who had to provide for their children working at a restaurant, and I'm just like, I don't know how the hell they do it. I really don't. And that just that perspective alone, and then going into the kitchens and seeing the immigrants working the food stations, and how, oh my god, they all had like 2 or 3 jobs, and they were sending money back to their families, and it's like, that has so much like of an effect on the formation I have and the perspective I have, because that itself really puts it into perspective because yeah, you may be struggling a bit. And of course, living in LA and being an artist and doing a million things, I had like 4 jobs and you are struggling, but at the same time, it's like somebody else is struggling more and somebody else has somebody that's dependent on them. And,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons why I went that route, why I went this route because of that. It's because it's always to me in the back of the mind, like the working class, and the working class it only gets discussed when they can weaponize the working class issues, not when
Yeah.
it's an actual working class person that never really gets their voice platform because they don't have the means to. You're always hearing it from secondhand, and that's why it's so important to pay attention to that.
Yeah. And just to add another point, you always hear politicians talk about the middle class or the working class, but they never talk about the poor.
Hmm.
Ever. Ever. Why is that? Why don't they ever want to do anything for actually the poor? Because they think that being poor is a moral failing versus a
Right.
systemic failing. So just
Yeah.
saying. Due to the sake of time, I only have a couple more questions because I want to make sure that you're not on here too long. But this is actually something that I wanted to ask. Hypothetically, you are now president of the United States. I know, right? Laughable. You're like, damn. Why this question? It's your inauguration day. What are the first 3 actions as president that you would take within your first 100 days?
Huh. Wow. Okay. Well, one of them would basically be to dissolve the military industrial complex to basically very minimal. You'd have an army, but you wouldn't have the level of just that we have, and close all our military bases,
Yeah.
um, remove them, dissolve, abolish the CIA, 100% abolish the CIA, covert agencies in general.
Hmm.
And this is a dream because no president would ever be allowed to do that. And then, of course, what I would do is change the entire structure. I would have more of, because I believe, for me, politically, the goal is a stateless society, but I don't believe that we can do that immediately
Hmm.
because humanity isn't ready for that. And I think, especially in the United States, ideally, I would just dissolve the whole thing. But then, where does that leave us, right? Like, because a lot of the people are going to be like, "Well, you should dissolve everything and the government and just let it all." But people have, unfortunately, become dependent so much on the system, a system that has failed them.
Hmm.
But what I would do is I would dissolve the presidency, still maintain, like bring people onto me, make it more of like a council where people can come together and make decisions. Congress isn't doing that. The Senate isn't doing that. The judicial branch appointees would not exist in that same element. They would definitely be not appointed for life. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Hmm.
And I think I would have more of a system of direct democracy, and our elections would be completely just redone, completely redone. Yeah, it's just, those are a few things that I would do in an
Hmm.
ideal world. I mean, for me, the big ones, though, would be the war machine because so much goes into the war and the intelligence apparatus that we have no control over, which is what's controlling our government. So that's why that would be the big ones.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I fully agree with you on all of that. What is something that you're going to double down on in 2022?
um the censorship aspect. I'm a huge advocate of free speech, obviously, and being a journalist too, but it's this thing where, you have Mumia, you have Julian Assange, you have political prisoners, and the reason they're in prison is because they exposed the
Hmm.
war crimes of the state. They exposed the corruption, and you shouldn't put people in prison for telling the truth. It's not a
Hmm.
crime for people to tell the truth. And we've come to a point where we don't have the watchdog media that what perhaps maybe for a second we used to have. We don't have, we have propagandists, we just have PR agents. We live in this world where if we don't allow the truth to come out, you're going to have a society that only hears one perspective, and that becomes extremely authoritarian and extremely fascistic. How are we going to fight for healthcare, for any sort of wage, for anything like that, anything you want to improve in the system, whatever issue it may be, if
Uh-huh.
we cannot tell people the truth, if they
Yeah.
control all the mechanisms of all the channels, all the internet, everything, how are we going to fight for anything? How are you going to get people to organize?
Yeah.
So we've come to the point where, before, this is where I think a lot of people on the left miss this. They talk about, well, in communism and this and that, they didn't have, like, you don't have free speech under capitalism. But the thing is, like, you didn't have the internet back then. You didn't have the surveillance state. Now information is decimated at such an alarming speed. Uh,
Mhm.
and and it's just like, the information gets to people so much more quickly, and not disseminated, I think is what I meant, but it gets to people so much more quickly, and we're not just handing out pamphlets. I mean, you should do that if you have a cause or an organization, sure, go and do it. But it's like, if you don't have access to the means of information, you're essentially losing access to the means of production, because
Yeah.
they're so intertwined now. And so, if you want to have any sort of change, it's got to happen through the media. And of course, the whole media has the whole television and all of that. And now they're trying to obviously get to social media, because that's where the younger generations are, and who they can, like, brainwashed the same way they brainwashed previous generations. And so,
Yeah.
without a free press, I think very little is ammunition is there for us to fight for every other issue, whether it's the environment, whether it's healthcare, whatever it is, to fight for.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question I'm going to ask is actually a fun question. Now, I'm going to preface it by saying this. If you say New York style pizza, I'm going to be seeing Kit Cabello on Saturday. He's going to have a problem with you
Oh,
because he
he
said
has a
Chicago
problem.
style pizza is the best. I'm not trying to cause a feud. I'm just saying.
No, sorry, Kit. I mean, we went, and this is I mean, Pasta and I went to Chicago with my brother, and we all had Chicago pizza. It was not, we tried different places. It was not the best. It was okay. It was somewhere better than others, but New York style pizza all the way. I was just in New York. The pizza is delicious, like, all the way, New York, all the way. Sorry, Kit. And the emperor objects, I know, but we'll fight.
Okay, okay. So that goes into my question. What is one food that Fiorella Isabel cannot live without?
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult.
God, I guess I really do like pasta. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
tacos. It's like between pasta and tacos. I really
Look,
love
you can do
tacos.
both. I don't care. Like,
Yeah, Mexican food is among my favorite. Obviously, my family's Peruvian, and Peruvians have some of the best cuisine all over the world, especially when it comes to seafood. But for me, Mexican food is like, wow, I love it.
based as fuck. By the way, I next time we talk, I want to get your opinion on AMLO trying, doing the attempt to
It's amazing.
nationalize lithium. That's actually a really good conversation to have next time when you come back on. I actually want to talk about that. Um, Speaking of Mexican, I think that's
Yeah,
a pretty base thing to do to
it is.
nationalize lithium. Yeah, go ahead and do it, but be prepared because the United States is going to come for you.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, oh,
yeah,
gosh.
true
But
story.
yeah, but the piece that is this stonks, the question that gives everybody in trouble. I gotta ask. I gotta ask. I gotta ask. What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, oh God, this is a um.
Yeah, yeah,
Do I have a favorite? I don't even know if I have a, like, I mean, I say, am I allowed to curse?
yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
eh, um, I don't know. I mean, I say fuck a lot. I mean, but, like,
Hmm.
I don't know. Like, if it's my favorite, I mean, Yeah, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship. Like, I don't like to be angry, but, given the circumstances,
Yeah.
happens pretty often. So,
But you can use it in very happy instances, you know
yeah.
what I mean?
I mean, I don't know if it was Gloria or Misty that always like say, "Oh, that douche canoe," or like
That's
Gloria.
this.
I know what her favorite is. It's
I
the
love
"see
it.
you next Tuesday" word, which I don't really say often at all. But
Yeah,
I just say, yeah, mostly like shit, fuck. I'm like very not,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, look, if somebody brings you some carbonara and it's sitting right in front of you, you're gonna use a four-letter word in your happiness as
yeah,
you're eating that
yeah.
carbonara or that Alfredo, or you're having those tamales. You're going to say it because you're just that happy.
It's
So
true. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, like
so use it in
motherfucking good or
kindness.
something like
Yeah.
something like.
So this is my final question, but this is actually going to put it pretty deep. But I hope this actually gives people a peer into uh, your your love of humanity and how you view the world. But it's an important question. So you've lived a long life and you're on your deathbed and you're reflecting on that life that you've had. What is one thought that you want people to remember about you?
Ooh. JB coming in with a big, deep questions. Um, I guess that I don't know, like I guess that I lived in a way that is truthful to who I am as a person, and that I've tried to
Yeah.
be as honest and as just encompassing the world we live in, and to really bring to light a lot of the realities and the truth that existed in the world, and that I hope that it was in some small way a great contribution.
On your headstone, it will say, "She told the truth."
Yeah, that would be great.
Look, that's basically, that's all she wrote. I look, I am deeply grateful for you gracing, my tiny little channel with your presence. Thank you for coming here to again tell the truth. And I am glad that I got your perspective, based on from what you want to say. And it was a privilege to have you, Miss Fiorella. And I am, hopeful that we will have many more conversations in the near future. Um,
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate you, and for asking these questions that I haven't been asked before. I think it's interesting and refreshing.
yeah. Also, I also put, your links in the description. You can go to the Convo Couch, the channel. The link is in the description. Also to Fiorella's Twitter page as well. And so you can go ahead and give her a follow, give them a sub if you can, please. And get news from a very honest perspective. So I highly encourage you to do that as well. Miss Fiorella Isabel, it was a deep pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. See you next time.
Thank you. See you next time. Also, to everyone, just to let you guys know, if you have not put a like for this stream, please make sure to do so. Also, if you haven't subscribed, what the hell are you doing? Make sure to subscribe. Take that beautiful, gorgeous thumb and hit the subscribe button. Just to let you guys know, my motto is always leave the world better than you found it. I want to wish you well. Also, please make sure to water yourselves, water your plants, leave the world better than you found it, and smoke them if you got them. Forehead kisses, mwah, to all of you. I love you.